G'day, Justin Hope from Right Source here, talking not-for-profits and helping your not-for-profit that you started be hopefully as successful as it can be, and looking at those things that you need to tackle from day one. So we've gone through a number. What we want to talk around today is the financial side, the financial governance, the dollars, the cents, and what you need to put in place for this side. And given that most people who start a not-for-profit don't necessarily have an accounting background, this is a video just to talk through the simple stuff you can do to put things in place from day one that will put you in good stead going forward. So first thing, number one, open a bank account. Sounds a bit silly. There's very valuable to do. It's also not necessarily as simple a process as you would like. Banks can be quite particular in what they need and the process you need to follow, but setting up a bank account is incredibly important from day one, and the first thing you should do. Why? Well, especially if you're the founder, you're like, oh, that's okay, I'll just manage the money in my account, and like there's no money yet, so it'll just all sit together. And that's exactly the reason to have a separate bank account. If you have one bank account that is the not-for-profit, it starts giving agency that the not-for-profit is a separate thing. It has its own life. And if you use that bank account for the not-for-profit stuff, even if that means you're putting money in personally, which is absolutely fine to do, putting money in personally for the not-for-profit to use for its initial setup and activity, at least you can start getting a feel for what it's costing to run this thing and what's involved in it. So it starts giving you some transparency and some understanding of what's going on in the not-for-profit. The next thing from there is, you've got a bank account, you should look to get some sort of accounting system. Now, it doesn't need to be complicated, something like Xero, which is quite customizable, it fits quite well, and pricing plans can be quite effective. But there's a lot of different options out there. Have a look, get something in there, but just something that allows you to keep track of what you're spending in the not-for-profit, what's coming through, if you are getting income, where that's coming from. You might need to have to invoice people. Just something that gives you those tools, those financial tools, to track money coming in and actually get that money coming in as well. The other thing that financial tool will be useful for, and the bank account, is at some point, hopefully, you will be successful in getting some funding. Now, this funding might be in the term of a grant. They'll need one for the application process. You'll need a bank account to apply for the grant. So having that in place allows the application to keep going. But once you've got the grant, you'll receive the money in, but you'll most likely need to track what you're spending on it. Now, both for your own purposes, but also often when people give funds or grants to not-for-profits, they want to understand, well, what has that money been spent on? That financial system should allow you to do that, and making sure that's set up. And again, if your skill set isn't that, get some help. Talk to a bookkeeper or an accountant about how you get that set up so that you can use it and track it. It shouldn't be a lot of time. You don't need to get someone else to do it completely. That you can do that. It's just get it set up so that it tracks those things, so you do have that transparency and you know what is happening with the money of the not-for-profit. The next question people have is, do I need a budget? Now, the simple answer is no, you don't need a budget. But a budget is a tool that you can use that can help you plan and manage your organization. So is it something that's useful? Generally, yes. Does it look the same for everyone? Absolutely not. It's unique to every organization. And where would you start? There's two places you could start, and it depends on what's happening in your not-for-profit. The first one that I personally start with is something that looks 8 to 12 weeks out and looks at your cash. So money in, money out. So what are you expecting to spend over the next 12 weeks? What money are you expecting to come in? And it might be no money coming in. Well, that's good. Well, what money personally are you contributing to help things keep going? Now, initially, that's quite daunting because there may not be a lot of money in, but it starts giving you a line of sight. Like in 3 months, how much money will I probably have spent, or how much money will I expect in, and is that a problem? Now, this is as relevant for a startup to a well-functioning, established not-for-profit. If you know in 3 months you've got a cash problem coming, it allows you to act now and do something about it. There's a whole range of things you might need to do, but it allows you to act now. If you find out in 3 months, oh, that's it, I've got no money left, there's only really one action that's going to happen, and that's you're going to stop. Because when you've got no money left, you can't do anything. You have no leverage. There's nothing you can do. So that cash flow is important. I would suggest having a look at doing that, and doing that relatively regularly just to understand where things are tracking. The other thing that you might do and might be needed is a 12-month budget. Now, some grant applications, some work that you do as a not-for-profit, sometimes they request, can we see what your budget is for 12 months? Even when you go through the ACNC application process, they do want to understand what money you're expecting to come in the next 12 months and where you're going to spend it. That's what we're looking at. Over the next 12 months, what's coming in, what's going out. This does not need to be complicated. There's another video that I've done on YouTube that talks you through from scratch to budget being completed and takes 20 minutes. So really doesn't need to be complicated. You should be able to, if you get some help or look at the video, you should be able to knock out a budget in an hour or two and have something there. Doing the budget is useful because it allows you to think, so, well, this is my strategy. How am I executing that in terms of funds coming in? What am I spending? What am I doing? That's a useful thought process. Where there's more value in that type of budget is when you start measuring yourself back against it. So a month goes past, you go, well, this is what I thought was going to happen. This is what has actually happened. What's different and why? And that why, understanding why things are different, that then allows you to adjust and go, okay, well, there's a problem here. I'm going to fix that. That's going well. I'm going to do more of that and adjust for the next month. So it allows you to adjust your course of action as you go. That's the value of a budget. Doing a budget doesn't necessarily give you a lot of value. Measuring yourself against it as you go does. But again, you don't need to. Organizations have been quite successful starting up without having a budget. So don't feel like you have to. Understand why it might be useful, and then make a decision as to whether that fits what you're trying to do and whether it fits what you feel comfortable with. The next thing in terms of something to contemplate is registering with the tax office. Now, you would be registered as part of your setup process as setting up the organization. You'd be registered, but you wouldn't have been registered for GST and you wouldn't be registered as an employer. So there's two decision points that will happen on your journey where you will decide to either employ people or be registered for GST. Now, we've got another video in terms of employing people, but that's really about when you decide to get people to be paid employees. At that point, you need to register with the ATO to tell them that you're doing that. GST is something that you can register at any point to be registered for. But once you have turnover of $150,000 a year as a charity, you need to register for GST. So that's something you can contemplate, but once you do register for GST, then you need to start having GST on your invoices and also accounting for the GST that you pay. So it does add a little bit more complexity, and it's really about what suits you and your organization as to when you register for GST. The other thing that people get a bit nervous about when they're starting a not-for-profit is they start hearing about having to have an audit. We're registered as a charity or as a not-for-profit, and now we need to get an audit. Or there'll be an audit, or someone needs to audit us. What does that mean? Now, yes, if you're on ACNC, you will eventually need to get an audit. That won't be required until you get at least $500,000 of turnover. So $500,000 turnover, at that point, you will need to get what is called a review, which could be done by an auditor. It's not a full-blown audit, but it is a review, and it does require an external person to come in and check your financials. So that $500,000 is when you need to start worrying about an auditor. A full audit happens at $3 million turnover. So at that point, hopefully you've got enough resources that isn't a big deal, but there you type. So from day dot, from the start of your not-for-profit, audit isn't something you need to be worried about necessarily, but it will just depend on how your funding goes and how quickly your organization grows. The last thing, and it's not always completely financial governance or financial, is starting to about how you measure your impact. And starting this from the start is really good. So impact can be measured by financial measurements, like how much you spent, how much funds you've received. That's absolutely a way to measure impact. But you can also measure impact by the number of people you see, the number of food parcels you deliver, the number of beds you've got available. There's ways you can measure impact. If you can start capturing that information early on, that'll help both in terms of communicating that impact to others who might be looking to give you funds, but also being able to tell your story and capture, how you've progressed and how you're growing, and, whether you're making a difference and what difference you are making. So that's it from a financial governance point of view in looking to start your not-for-profit. The things you need to think about from day one, start getting some things in place that will put you in good stead as your organization continues to grow and continues to be successful. There's other videos we've done, as I said, check those out on YouTube's site. We find them useful both in terms of the not-for-profit setup, but also more generally on the not-for-profit space and governance. But otherwise, thanks again for your time. It's been Justin Hogg from RightSource.